Hi, everyone. This is Trish Kendall, your host for the Choose and Become interview series. So today I have with me, I'm going to say hi really quick before I set context. I have Rick Chavez. Rick, will you say hi?
Hello, everybody.
All right. So Rick's going to get in. We're going to dive in a minute. But two things. One, I'm thrilled to have Rick. So Rick and I knew each other, but really connected strongly through the TEDx experience. So I was honored to be a part of the experience with Rick at TEDx Walden Pond. And I said, I got to bring some of Rick to the masses. But he and I have had an opportunity before then to really connect specifically about both of our origin stories. And so I'm excited to share some of that with the audience today. But I'm going to take a step back before we move forward, Rick, for those people who are new to the show. I made 5 critical choices on my journey from the pit of despair to the peak of success, enduring success, what I consider my enduring success. And those 5 critical choices, you're all going to hear them in a minute, because the whole purpose of this interview series is for me to interview people I admire and people who inspire me, to get their perspective and experience and voice as it relates to these 5 choices in their lives. So with that being said, Rick, will you just I didn't even say anything about you, because I want you to introduce yourself and then I'll pepper in anything that I want. Will you share a little bit about Rick?
Well, first, I'm thrilled to be talking to you again, Trish. It was I'm honored to be here and just incredibly moved by your story, as you know. So I have deep regard for you, and glad to be here. It's funny because I think people always are sure that their story makes total sense when, from outside in it looks odd. So of course I think my story makes complete sense, but I have probably a little bit of an unconventional story. I grew up in a beautiful family, but in a smaller place in the world, Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm first generation, college educated. I'm a Latino, Hispanic American. A lot of what I think I was able to do, I credit to my mother and my parents. Frankly, I just played along, but I learned to be. I'm a musician. I felt that for a very long time. I love technology. I kind of got introduced to that very young. I have this dubious distinction of knowing the internet from like the early 80s or late 70s, if you can imagine that. So when people say the early internet and they talk about the late 90s, I have a slightly different perspective. But I have been a consultant and a startup person, an entrepreneur, and then a consultant. And what I found was consulting and advisory work and strategy work with companies became a fabulous place to spot ideas. And then I jump out and do a startup to take advantage of, commercializing the idea. That was complete luck, complete happenstance. But it was a pattern that worked for me. So like I said, I think my path makes sense, yeah. but it has led me to do some really interesting things over time. So from the early startup phase and then the advisory things I've done with many companies, I shifted my focus in the aughts and in the last 15 years to really focus on the challenge of large companies innovating at scale, trying to be something different, move to some new space, and unlearn, and loosen up the corporate memory, which wants to hold on to a different way of work and mindset and ways of succeeding, to go to some new place that actually feels a little scary and unknown. And so I've learned that through that journey, as you know, a lot of what is happening is it's a game in your head, and it's a challenge of creating confidence and conviction to move in a new direction, which I never started off thinking that's where I'd ultimately end up. But a lot of the work I do is really in the space of helping people see a different future and then act their way toward it.
Oh, well, how about this? And I know you think about this as you work with your clients. I want to get your perspective as it relates to Rick. We all have our own definition of success.
Mm-hmm.
you have been incredible. And you say in passing, early internet days, 70s and 80s, like you have amazing stories around that too. So
Yeah.
whatever, we might have to have a part two because they
Yeah.
are fascinating stories. But we each have our own definition of success. What I'd like to know is, what does creating enduring success mean to you? To you,
Yeah.
Rick?
Well, I think that is such a great question. Um, I'll I'll answer that by first saying I had it totally wrong, and a calamity. A couple of sort of jarring experiences, professional experiences. I At the time I thought those experiences were marks of failure,
Hmm.
and it took me years to realize that those experiences were what gave me success, were what caused character to appear. I like to think of myself as a person of character, but I don't, or integrity. I don't know that I truly was that until I lived through calamity and thought I had failed and came up on the other side of it and realized, no, that's very interesting. That what's on the other side of these experiences. And what I learned was two things. Um, First, lifelong curiosity and learning, and a desire to go into the unknown with humility, and with a strange combination of humility and confidence, right? In other words,
Hmm.
that I believe something is here that I should experience, but I also don't really know what I'm doing. But that notion of like being an explorer, being thoughtful in the exploration, and enjoying every moment of it, to me, that is the biggest success I've had, is the learning journey that I've been on.
Hmm.
And I didn't see that for its value until I had a couple of, sort of calamitous experiences that set me back and then allowed me over time to have to recreate myself or relaunch myself. And in my mind, I was actually literally relaunching myself. I felt that I had to be back on the comeback trail
Hmm.
to get to some place, and it just took me some period of time to be at peace with it and realize, no, the journey itself is actually pretty good. And the experience of learning along the way is what has, I think, been sort of core to my, if I have success, I do believe it's enduring success,
Oh.
but it's in being at peace with that journey.
And that is, I imagine, inherently woven into how you work with your clients too. I, I,
Oh yeah,
it almost
absolutely.
exudes from you the humility and confidence and going on this exploration. And I can see you as a guide almost in working with your clients or those around you, such that they can experience that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I, I would like to think, and I think my clients, some of them might say, I hope they would say this of me,
Mhm.
but I am always humbled by the challenges that they face, because how you cognize your own challenge is how you do it. Like I could observe them and say, well, that doesn't seem so hard. They just need to do this and that, and then boom, we're done.
Yeah.
But the truth is, there's a lot more complexity to it, and there's the game in the head. And so I'm always thoughtful that how they are seeing who they are and where they are
Ugh.
is pivotally important to any progress, any forward motion, or any motion, hopefully, that is moving in a good direction for them.
Mhm.
And that
Mhm.
trajectories of change are not ones that I would want to give my clients. It's the ones they want for themselves. And so I've learned that, because consulting can be, this like answer thing, right? Like
Yeah.
we're paid to be smart, answer. And by the way, I lived in that for my early part of the career. I thought, as long as I'm the smartest person in the room, I'll be great. And then you realize, oh yeah, that doesn't work so well, because that wasn't their answer, and they pretty much didn't care about the fact that you thought you were smart. And so I think that, I've learned to try to really think, what is it you want for yourself? And the other question I often ask clients is, where do you want to be by when? Because I think that that notion of timing is so important, right? Um, it can tell you about, for example, is this person being way too hard on themselves and the organization around them, or is this a thoughtful understanding that this is going to be a journey, not a flipping of a switch.
And in some cases, I'll move us forward, but in some cases, I bet leaders within those companies are relaunching
Oh yeah.
themselves as individuals, or the company is relaunching. And so here all of a sudden, through your calamitous experiences, you then have chosen to take that innately and then purposely in your work to help elevate others. So
I hope
let's
so.
keep going on the
Yeah.
idea of a journey, because
Right.
I love your words around exploring and a journey. The first critical choice that I made on my journey to enduring success was to pick up the phone when my sister called, which you very much know about. Uh, what
Mm,
I learned when I made that choice to pick up the phone, what I learned is that success begins with making a first choice. Nobody can choose for us.
right.
That was a profound choice action for me. But since then, I've made a series of first choices that aren't quite as profound. They're more practical. What I'd like to know will you share one of your first choices that when you reflect on your life that you made that really impacted your journey here?
I can think of two, um, that are important to me for very different reasons. But I know we're
Give
a
me
big
both. Give me both. I want both.
okay. Well, I'll start with with one of the calamitous ones. So I had built a startup company outside the Boston area, in the
Mhm.
Boston area in the sort of early 90s, and with several friends from college, actually. And so I had three other co-founders and myself. And my three co-founders died in a tragic plane accident. And a very, uh, it was really calamity because I had just been with them, and we had decided to meet. We met twice a year because one of them we had a West Coast office and then East Coast folks. And so we'd meet in the middle of the country. And that particular year, we decided to meet in New Mexico, which is where I'm from, in Santa Fe. And it was this time of the year. I always remember this because it was at March Madness, and two of them were basketball nuts. And so I just left them because I had to go back and see a client. And I took a red eye back, got off the plane, and got the news. Um, and so I think the choice at that time that I made was um, to fully embrace the pain of the loss, right? To not try to brush it under the rug. Like I was going to act in a way that I hoped the guys would respect. Like it was really important to me that they were still around, but they weren't. Um, and that I would treat everybody in the families and everybody in the firm, find good homes for all the people, like all of that, because that's what they would have wanted. So I made a choice that I was going to put myself second, but not so much the grief. Like I'm like, I'm not going to be grieving. No, I was grieving them the whole time.
Mhm.
Um, but it caused me to see a path forward, and it caused me to be open to advice from very kind people that I might not have otherwise listened to. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I was just kind of in shock. You know, truth. I was in
Yeah.
shock. I didn't know I was in shock, but lo and behold, somebody later said, "Well, you're in shock," and I said, "You're right, I am." So I think the choice. I don't think I was particularly smart in it. I just think it just came to me. Um,
Can
the
I
other, yeah,
before you go to the second one, and I'm only coming over the top because before you go to the second one, the
yeah.
thing that struck me about what you shared, you actually articulated through a heart-wrenching story, by the way, when you shared that with me first. I just now forgot about the punch in my stomach until you said it again. but you articulated your first choice was to embrace the hurt, which then led to being there for everyone in the firm and the families. And the domino effect that occurred because of the first choice that you made
Yeah.
enabled those other choices to come along the way. And thank you for the beautiful story to bring that home. Now tell me the second one.
It's a hard story to tell, but
Yes.
the second one is totally different. It's more of a personal story. So I have an incredibly close relationship with my mother, but we also were at loggerheads for many years. Because growing up Hispanic, Catholic in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and being first generation college educated, it was an enormous sacrifice for my parents, and my mother in particular was just completely devoted to us and our success. And in our family, it's priest, doctor, engineer, lawyer, like that was the order of things, right? And so she figured I was not going to be a priest pretty early on, but she was hoping for the others. And
So you let her down.
I totally let her down, and so when I wasn't, she was like, "And you're not going to even be a lawyer?" This was a hard thing for her. What is a consultant?
Right.
A consultant. It took me until I got when I did a couple corporate jobs at Adobe and Microsoft. And that was like 10 years ago. It took me like 20 some years before she finally felt calm that I had an okay job. My poor mom. But at one point I finally realized that we were kind of talking past each other. And and I had young children, and I really wanted them to know how wonderful my mother was, and that wasn't happening. So I said to her one day, and I don't even quite know, Trish, how I got to this, but I said, I want to have a conversation with you, and I want you to know that I choose you exactly as you are, just like that. I don't want to talk about the past. I don't want us to feel bad about anything. I choose you exactly as you are. And from that moment forward, everything changed. Everything changed. And we've been like super, super, like we always were. Like she would call me during the bad things would happen, tough things would happen. A family member would die or be hospitalized or something. She'd call me and we talked through it. But it just changed the nature of everything since then, and we have just a beautiful relationship now, which is
great. And your children's relationship with her.
Yeah. Oh my God, she's such a cheerleader. It's just amazing. Like my youngest daughter just got she's a graduate student at Berkeley, and she won a postdoc at Dartmouth, fellowship and postdoc at Dartmouth. Yeah, it's really cool. So she'll be here in the fall through for 2 years. Oh my God, my mother was like sending pictures and how wonderful, and she's so talented and so beautiful, and but she's almost too effusive. Yeah, no, they're great, and she's great with all the grandchildren.
The second critical choice I made on my journey was to commit to a two-way agreement. Now, for me, that agreement at the time was between me and my sister. It was actually a near contractual agreement. What I learned, what I experienced, or I felt is the force of committing to the agreement. And because I committed, actions that started out as, I have to do this. Are you kidding me? I have to do these things. You suck. Whatever. I joke about it, but I really did feel that way. Transformed to, I want to.
Yeah.
And my experience was, because I committed to this two-way agreement, I found joy in the ordinary. And that was the first time that I did. So since then, I've reflected on the two-way agreements that we all enter into, informally or formally, through our lives. And
right.
we're in them now. Is there a two-way agreement that you'll share? It could be current day, it could be yesterday, whatever it is, where it was a conscious decision to enter into this agreement, and what did you give? What did you get? Like, just, was it easy? Was it hard? And did you feel any type of transformation in that commitment?
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll go to the present. So I'm a huge believer in, um, and I love your story and the way you talk about this, but I'm a huge believer in the language of commitment. Um, um, I think the speech act of committing actually is powerful. And I find it to be particularly powerful in what I do with my teams and as a consultant advisor to clients, right? Because um, what I find is the stuff not said that lives in the ether is where all the devils are. It's where all the problems are, right? And so we just went through with one of my teams. It's a super complex program, lots of moving pieces. Um, Essentially setting conditions of satisfaction or commitments amongst the
Yes.
five people leading the team. I commit this to you. Um, and by the way, I need this of you, right? And so I'll give you. It's not a give get so much as it because that makes it seem transactional. It's more, here's what I want to be in relationship with you, and in order for me to be successful at this, I know myself. So here's what I request of you, and then we can go into a conversation about counteroffers, right? So I can request something of you that may not be reasonable, so I shouldn't expect you to say yes. This is the other big problem, is sometimes when people ask a thing, you feel like you have to say yes when you really mean, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And so it's perfectly okay to say, I'm really not sure because of. And so we try to create the context in which those authentic conversations can occur. And then the speech acts, once spoken, they're there. What are you going to do about them? You can't retract them. You can revise, but you can't conveniently forget that you made that
Yeah.
commitment. So we've been
And
doing this.
revise um, implies like communication too. Like, I can't revise it without you knowing. Like, we
Right,
now need to be so there's a constant
precisely,
communication. The language is there together. All right, keep going.
precisely. No, 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 no. That's a hugely important point because here's an example of what I'll find happens. And I have. You asked about what did I change along the way when I started to do this. One of the things I changed is when I get in a pickle, we all do. And we have the inevitable distractions. It could be family, it could be work, it could be whatever.
Mhm.
And what I would find myself doing is hunkering down and not saying anything because I was a little embarrassed that I didn't quite finish what I said I would do and I committed to. So I'm just not going to say anything. And then, of course, it's a domino effect. And then people get angry. They get like, well, I don't understand you and you're not responding to me. Why aren't you? So it's this really interesting cycle down, right, that occurs. So I learned to just simply say, hey, I need you to know I'm not going to make but here's what I can do. And once I did that, I couldn't believe how cathartic it was. Like I felt like a big weight being lifted. It was me. Like no one did it for me. It was a choice. Like to your point about choices you make, it was a
Yeah.
choice I made to accept transparency and communication and say something. And so that transparency and ongoing communication, I think, is a really important point that you made, and it comes with some difficulties, often because people are trying to do the right thing and don't want to disappoint.
I don't want to disappoint. Oh
Yeah.
my God. I'm not going to jump us ahead, but I am going to do a little foreshadowing right now.
Mm,
When we get to the fifth choice,
hmm.
because the fifth choice, Rick knows what my fifth choice is, which is to give and receive love and how that manifests differently for different people at different times. The story you just said to me about transparency and communication, like, to me, that is a manifestation of me showing up with the intent of giving my love the verb. Now, see, now I jumped forward.
Yeah.
Uh, because it takes choice
Yeah.
and it's a little scary too. And you might disappoint someone. All right. So there's my commercial for the fifth
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah.
I do have one maybe follow up question about the two-way agreement. It is an awesome example. I love this example. Is this something that you have instituted within your teams for a long time? Is it something you just started doing? Like, how long have you been, and you said it, conditions of satisfaction. How long have you been doing that?
Wow, like probably about 15 years now.
Okay.
I realized that that was so important. I don't assert it though. Um, I love your point you made earlier about choice making, right? And opting in to something we want for ourselves. So I will explain it and discuss give examples of like pros, like from two conditions. Like if you didn't do it, but you did do it, how would that feel? I'll do that.
Yeah.
But then I really like our teams to decide it's a good thing, right? And choose to be part of it.
I love it.
Yeah.
So I might steal a little bit of it. I might steal a little
Sure.
bit. So let's
Sure.
put a
Yeah.
pin in that because I'll have a Rick and Trish exploration
Okay.
again to dive deeper into it. It does lead us to the third critical choice. And the third critical choice I made was to build trust in myself. I had to build trust in myself in order to inspire the trust of others. And I feel like what you just articulated with conditions of satisfaction and language around commitment and even choice around, there's got to be so much trust in that. You're like trusting each other and you're trusting yourself. So that's why I thought it weaved right in.
Yeah.
But I do want to step back because I want to know, when is a time that you had to build trust in yourself? Will you share that with us? And then if you can put words to how you did it, or one or two things that you did to help build trust in Rick, in yourself.
Wow. Yeah. That's yeah, another one of these profound questions, and it seems simple on the first level is simple, but it's quite profound. I I I lost confidence in myself. I was probably supremely confident, and that was probably not good. Let me just say that for a chunk of my early career. Yeah, the part of this story, I launched this .com company. I never actually launched it during .com days. I did it before that. And I never wanted the .com experience. It just sort of happened around us. But it doesn't matter. We were victims of the .com bomb. And that led me to a pretty dark place where I decided I totally failed. Like I missed it. And I was not seeing things for what they are, not seeing people and understanding them for who their authentic selves actually became versus what I thought. And it had like levels of lack of confidence and trust. And so, I think that I'd have to credit my family more than anything else for believing in me before I did again, because it took me some time to. I'd love to tell you that the .com bomb happened and I just got back on that horse and ride. They say, get back on that horse and ride. It's like, yeah, no, that for some people, maybe that is it.
Even being from New Mexico, you couldn't get right back on that horse.
I couldn't, but I felt resilience in family and I felt like obligation to my family. I grew up in such a strong, committed family environment. I think I kind of credit that belief. I remember having this chat with one of my very best friends and when we were talking about values and enduring values, things that matter a lot to us and how do we identify ourselves. And this was around that period of time. And I said, well, the number one thing that I'm always going to be and I'm never, ever going to sacrifice is a great dad and spouse, but a great dad. Like I will never allow myself to have a moment where my kids thought I wasn't connected and checked in, right? And interestingly, Trish, I think that led me forward because then I realized they've got to go to school, they're going to go to college, I've got
Right.
to get going. And as I began to say, well, things actually aren't bad. Actually, I have a lot of skills. Okay, I can do this. I can do that. I built back confidence because I saw the value in family as so like inviolate for me, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I know how to
No,
describe it
no,
other than
you
that.
just did. Oh my God. And you just did. And the nugget that I'll take is the choice of being a great dad, which was instilled in you because of your family and growing up and your mom and dad, but still, it was still your choice. And I love that story because it transcends the singular, almost self-oriented version of when we fail, when something does not work the way we intended it to. It's
Right.
very easy to stay in that self-oriented bubble of not trusting ourselves to keep going. And you're like, listen, I have to. And
Yeah.
you did amazingly.
Yeah.
I want to I want to flip it um to you are an incredible leader. Like you also downplay, which is one of the things that I think is so endearing about you, your professional success and your leadership. As a leader at your firm, I want to know how people inspire your trust.
How they inspire my trust.
How does someone earn your trust?
Well, a couple, I think, things come to mind that they're really important to me. One is ability. I'll speak first about, let's say, some people who are more peers, like people
Right?
we're suffering together to run a program or sell a thing or whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say the ability to willingness to be vulnerable
Hmm.
is to say, I really am not sure about this. I've never, I know you've done this, but I haven't, and or vice versa. And where we're going is I'm a little underwater here, or it could be positive too, but but just the ability to be vulnerable, because once you're there, then you can work with something, and clearly that marks trust, right? Somebody was willing to say that to me and be in a trust relationship with me. I want to honor that. Like I'm a sucker for that. I'll always honor that. That to me is really very powerful. Um, I would say I'm kind of back to the language of commitments. I actually really do like it, and so if somebody says I'm going to do X by Y time, then that is pretty key to trust, especially if that has to do with somebody else. In other words, I promise I'm going to work with so and so who's sinking a little bit on the project to make sure that things go okay and they feel confident again or something, like, you know what I mean? Especially if it's
Yeah.
about pulling up somebody on the team, because then if that doesn't happen, it has a domino effect and it actually affects the human beings who were expecting some help and didn't get it.
Yeah.
So I think things like that tend to be really important in inspiring trust.
I sometimes dive into with teams two of the things you were just talking about, the authenticity, but also language of commitment. You said earlier, when you don't have a commitment to language of commitment, things can live in the ether.
Yeah.
And it's hard to build trust, or it's easy to lose trust if you haven't created the right expectations because you haven't communicated to understand, which goes all the way back to your two-way agreement.
Right.
And just if we can just take more time in order to verbalize and listen such that there is a clear understanding of the expectations between the two, then
Right.
that elevates trust.
Oh my God. So true. That is 1,000%
But
correct.
we're so fast to go, well, whatever. That will be like Rick and Trish part two. That will be Rick and Trish part two because we could keep going there.
Okay. Good.
Um, I am going to move us to the fourth choice. The fourth critical choice I made was to create community and belonging.
Mm,
And totally acknowledge these words are used all the time now, everywhere, and there's different definitions of what they mean. I do have to say, when I was 30 years old, I used the word belonging. And I didn't even know it was going to be a thing. But
right.
what I knew is that I never belonged. I
Mm,
never belonged anywhere.
Mm.
And my upbringing had created that. And then I had started to wear, almost as a badge of honor, my unneed uh, to belong,
Right.
which was such a false, which is just like a racket.
Right.
And so when I was 30 years old, I looked around and realized that I was friendly with everyone, but friends with no one.
Yeah.
And I wanted to belong. And so I did something about it. And so, all joking aside, the idea of creating belonging for ourselves, and now for me, creating belonging for those around me is very critical and central to who I am. Will you tell us what it feels like to not belong?
Mm. Well, I think I could sort of, the way I might come at this is years of feeling like an imposter was probably the way I kind of come at not belonging, right? Because um, I can remember people thinking that I was more capable or that I was surely an expert. For example, let's just pick technology and all
Yeah.
things internet, right? Because I was very much, I have been very much involved in the whole digital revolution for many years now. I can't believe it, decades now.
Uh,
And
right.
yeah, but I didn't feel like I had been that I was particularly expert. I remember getting asked to join a couple of boards, and I'm like, "Oh, no, you don't want me on your board. I don't belong." You know,
Hmm.
you know, and I don't know if it's exactly the way you mean it, but I certainly came at it as feeling I don't belong to these
Yeah.
places because I don't have the right to be there. And it was strange. I had to have a couple of friends over time tell me, "What, snap out of it," and then which wasn't that helpful. And then another
Because
said,
then you didn't snap out of it.
"No, you didn't. You don't." But the play, yeah. Well, you didn't ask me how I came out of it, but I remember feeling very much like I didn't belong, and also that I was not allowing myself to belong, which I
Right.
wasn't seeing that for many years. And then it occurred to me, wait a minute, and this may have been similar to
Yeah.
your
Keep going. Yeah.
epiphany
I want to know your
of
journey.
where I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean I don't belong?
Yeah.
I If I don't belong, then I'm never going to create belonging. If I can't see that, because truthfully, I actually do stand for a world where everyone belongs. I really do. I fervently believe that. I believe in diversity. Like my colleagues have heard me do my soapbox on this. Like I believe that diversity is the driver of all great accomplishment. Diversity of thought, diversity of gender, diversity in all its dimensions, right?
Diversity of experience.
Diversity of experience, all these things, right? Because I've learned that through life and through, and so, but if you follow that through, right, follow that through line, the only way that works is if you believe everyone belongs,
Yeah.
that they have a right to be in the room, right, and that
Yes.
they should all feel permission to participate in whatever it is we're doing. It could be building a new business, it could be building a new product, it could just be there in community, around the school board, or it could be all kinds of different things, right? And you realize so many people feel they don't belong.
Yep.
This is a world that wants to exclude and separate, and isolate. So anyway, I think I just kind of came to my senses and said, well, shit, if I
No,
don't
keep going.
belong,
Yeah.
then, or if I don't think I belong, then there's no way I can create belonging. And that was not acceptable to me. And I changed.
I just adore you. I just think that is, thank you for that. How about that? Thank you for that. Uh, I'm going to take us to the fifth critical choice.
Oh boy, this one's tough.
This is, look, I'm emotional. I'm emotional. So I'm going to check myself really quick. Because it doesn't need to be an emotional question. I think it's practical or profound. So the fifth critical choice that I made on my journey was to finally embrace, like embrace the fact that uh, I had a boundless ability to love. The verb, like to show up and give my love, and that I had a boundless ability or capacity to receive love. And so the fifth choice I made was in accepting that and then actually doing it. For me, I think an interesting thing is I wasn't ready to make that choice until I made those four other
Mm,
choices. And so the way that I went through my journey and in this conversation with you is very linear. But I don't think it has to be linear. You
mm,
know,
right.
like listen, here's the trick. Just choose to give love and receive love, and all those other choices will naturally happen. For me, I had to learn and experience and evolve through my exploration in order to. So that is background. Uh, Giving love, the verb, manifests differently for different people in different situations all the time.
Right.
Will you, can we riff just a little bit on your idea of giving and receiving love, the verb, which is a choice? And then if there's examples, whether that's through you growing up with your family or in your early professional year or as professional years or as a leader, uh, an example of how giving love or receiving love manifests itself.
Yeah. Well, so I think I'll start by saying I was I found myself a dad way younger than I would have ever imagined. So I was a very young dad. I was a father of 23, and somewhat unexpectedly. And because we all have these plans, we're going to go to graduate school and this and that, and then But the reason I bring that up is that I had this beautiful child. I mean, just a beautiful child. And then there was another one, and then we had a third, and I was doing startups and building my career and running hard at all of that. And I say it because children have no guile. That love is just such a purity thing. It's like, wow, I'm a dad. This is amazing. And I would say that the pureness of my kids, especially as I was building a career, I had them so young, and they loved it too. They were like, I was always doing stuff with them, so we were giving each other of our time, we were giving each other of our attention, right? And to me, the giving of attention and the giving of presence was very profoundly first in family, but it has been super important to me through my professional career, right? And then I became a yogi, and that helped me because I was recovering from an injury, and this whole notion of being present in the moment, um, working to your degree, and only asking that of others. Those kinds of concepts became really formative to me, because being present to me is one of the best, biggest ways of, I think, manifesting love in the world, and certainly in the workplace, because so many people, oh yeah, sure, yeah, yeah, and we're all driven to distraction. People are like parallel processing, and they got this thing, and and so, but to put them down, to really be present, to be actively listening, to whoever it is, that to me is probably, I know it's a simple thing, but it's something that has become harder, and I'm more aware of its importance.
Mm-hmm. And it's practical and profound and simple, but not easy.
No, definitely not easy. Definitely not easy.
And it's a choice every time.
Yeah. Yes.
Uh, so you chose when I asked you to spend time with me, not only spend time with me, but allow me to bring my community into our conversation. You chose to be present and give me your attention. I thank you for your choice to give me that love. And I hope that you feel the love that I want to give back to you. I know you will receive it.
I do. And I'm super touched and thrilled to be part of this and humbled to be part of this. So thank you for inviting me.
Rick, you inspired me the minute we met. You were one of the first people a number of years ago to hear my Anchor inspirational speech. And your authentic, loving, great dad reaction to that motivated me to expand my view on what types of companies and organizations and teams would actually embrace it. So I've never told you that it expanded my belief in the universal message. And
wow, great.
So that's
universal.
Yes, and you're amazing. Okay, so everybody, thank you for being along this journey with me. You will see, I'll post it, but you got to look up Rick Chavez. Just look up TEDx Talk or TEDx Walden Pond, because they got to check it out. But I am going to say, watch this, watch this interview series. His TEDx Talk is more industry related, right? More industry, thriving in turbulent times. And I wanted to give my community the view behind the curtain of that with Rick Chavez, the dad, the son, the leader, and my friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Choose and become.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Choose and Become interview series. To check out more episodes, go to www.trishkendall.com/podcast. Or go to any of your favorite podcast channels, including YouTube, under Trish Kendall Speaks, and you'll find this interview and more. Choose and become.